When a consumer enters debt review in South Africa, they are stepping into a highly specific legal state. It is a transitional period engineered for a single purpose: to achieve a legally verified credit rehabilitation. But exiting this system is not a passive event. You cannot simply wait out a clock, and the status does not automatically expire after a set number of years. Once entered, the consumer is legally locked in. This creates a critical bottleneck. The consumer remains frozen in the under review status on their credit profile until a specific statutory authorization is triggered. There is only one mechanism that breaks this lock: the formal issuance of a clearance certificate. We are going to map the precise technical conditions and legal exceptions required to trigger the generation of this certificate. This state change requires a registered debt counselor. They serve as the mandated statutory authority to execute the transition. However, the debt counselor does not have arbitrary power to grant this exit. Their authorization is bound by a strict, multi-tiered logic tree of compliance. To understand how this logic tree operates, we have to strip away the generalized advice usually given to consumers and look directly at the raw statutory mechanics. A common assumption, even among financial professionals, is that a consumer must achieve absolute zero liability across all their accounts before they can exit the process. That assumption is mathematically incorrect. Exiting debt review is a problem of strict Boolean logic, where the clearance certificate is simply the final output of a rigorous verification matrix. This is the logic tree we will build. Our target output is the clearance certificate. The direct path is total settlement. Mechanically, this requires the complete mathematical liquidation of every debt in the review order: credit cards, personal loans, vehicle finance, all driven to zero. The debt counselor's operational role in this baseline scenario is pure data validation. They must verify these zero balances by securing official paid-up letters directly from each credit provider. While this pathway is mathematically simple, it collides with the reality of complex credit portfolios. If a consumer holds a 20-year mortgage, forcing them to wait until that specific account hits absolute zero would mean locking them in debt review for decades. Total settlement is the most direct legal pathway, but treating it as the exclusive route creates an artificial trap for consumers holding significant secured assets. To prevent that trap, the statutory framework contains a deliberate parallel pathway. This is the secured asset exception, designed specifically to handle long-term property mortgages or home loans. The system recognizes a structural difference in risk. Short-term unsecured revolving debt represents high default volatility. A long-term asset-backed mortgage does not. To unlock this node, a strict dual condition must be met. The consumer must zero out all short-term and unsecured debts, while the home loan remains active. The home loan itself does not need to be settled for the system to authorize a legal exit. The debt counselor's specific verification task shifts here. They must audit the active mortgage account to ensure current payments are completely up to date, with no historical arrears remaining under the review order. The legal definition of a rehabilitated consumer under this framework explicitly permits the retention of massive long-term liabilities, provided the high-risk unsecured debt is cleared. But the matrix must also account for an anomaly: debts that can neither be paid off nor classified as active secured assets. This brings us to a tertiary non-payment resolution mechanism: prescribed debt. Prescription occurs when liabilities expire under statutory time limits, losing all legal enforceability. Secondly, creditors occasionally execute explicit write-offs of certain accounts. Because these debts no longer legally exist, they completely bypass the standard zero-balance settlement requirement. Validating this pathway demands stringent evidentiary documentation. The debt counselor must prove the debt is truly nullified, not merely dormant or sold to a third-party collector. Treating a dormant account as prescribed without explicit legal confirmation from the creditor introduces massive compliance risk, potentially invalidating the entire clearance process. Statutory clearance is ultimately concerned with eliminating legally enforceable short-term liabilities. The system does not care whether that elimination occurred via capital payment or legal nullification. Having mapped the rules, we must look at the operating system that actually processes them. All three clearance pathways, settlement, secured exceptions, and nullification, must physically pass through a central processing unit, the registered debt counselor. The operational burden here is immense. The counselor must aggregate disparate, asynchronous data streams from multiple credit providers, simultaneously proving that all logic gates are satisfied. Historically, this required manual, paper-based verification. Today, the process is transitioning to streamlined digital submission platforms. An integrated digital gateway takes raw consumer data from multiple creditors and instantly routes it against the statutory requirements. This accelerates the transition from raw data gathering to official legal certification. For the consumer, this digital efficiency drastically reduces the latency of the legal state change, removing months of administrative delay. The debt counselor is the final statutory authority, digitally executing the entire compliance framework. This is the finalized clearance logic tree, fully operational. Legal clearance from debt review is a multi-tiered framework. It accounts for various debt structures while maintaining strict compliance standards. The first pathway processes the baseline total settlement for straightforward unsecured credit portfolios. The second pathway applies the secured asset exception, legally allowing the retention of an active home loan. And the third legally nullifies prescribed or written-off debts. None of these pathways execute independently. The strict, non-negotiable validation of the debt counselor is required to seal the logic gate. For credit risk professionals evaluating a rehabilitated consumer, this model clarifies exactly what they are looking at. A clearance certificate indicates rigorous structural compliance and total risk mitigation of unsecured liabilities, even if the consumer retains a mortgage. The ultimate systemic outcome of this logic tree is clear: converting a locked, high-risk consumer state into a verified, functional participant in the credit economy. Mapping these legal mechanics reveals a sequence of verification steps.